from the moment he first grasped a weapon. His very existence was forged in the crucible of conflict. Descended from a proud lineage, his reputation as a formidable combatant had steadily grown. He was renowned for his courage, a decorated soldier who never flinched from even the most perilous confrontations. He had participated in innumerable campaigns, shedding blood for his people and their cause, earning, or so he had assumed, their profound respect. For years, the galaxy had been racked by a devastating war. An interstellar alliance had been forged to confront a formidable adversary that threatened every sentient species. Each race contributed its most skilled warriors to the fray. Krax was among them, leading his detachment against an unrelenting foe, an army of emotionless, calculating machines bent on utter annihilation. The alliance was teetering on the brink, yet as long as they stood united, hope persisted. On this particular day, however, hope seemed to be evaporating. The battle raged with a ferocity surpassing anything Krax had ever witnessed. Explosions ripped through the atmosphere, and starships plummeted from the heavens in fiery cascades. Krax, ever the leader, fought at the vanguard. His alien physique, imposing and robust, moved with calculated precision, his advanced weaponry decimating enemies. Yet even he could not avert the inevitable. As he directed his unit to press forward, a colossal detonation erupted nearby. Instinctively, Krax threw himself in front of his comrades, absorbing the full force of the blast. The impact hurled him across the battlefield, his armor fracturing, his body reeling. Pain surged through him as he crashed to the ground, his vision blurring. He could dimly perceive the surrounding chaos, the desperate cries of soldiers, the ominous hum of approaching enemy drones. He was immobilized, his once potent frame now a broken vessel. Krax attempted to signal for assistance, his clawed hand reaching for the device on his wrist. His unit had to be nearby. They had to be. But when he activated the comm, only silence answered. Bewilderment gave way to dread as he realized they were abandoning him. He heard their voices, the cold directives from his own kind, speaking of withdrawal. They had assessed the situation and deemed him a liability, no longer an asset in their eyes. Krax was a damaged piece of equipment. Its purpose fulfilled. His people placed paramount importance on strength. Weakness was to be cast aside, discarded. Thus, as Krax lay bleeding on the battlefield, his own kind deserted him. The other allied forces, preoccupied with their own survival, offered no succor. No one came. No one cared. Krax's heart pounded, not from the agony, but from the profound sense of betrayal that overwhelmed him. His entire existence had been dedicated to his people, to fighting for the Alliance. Now, when he needed them most, they were gone. The burden of his perceived failure weighed heavily upon him, his body feeling increasingly cumbersome with each passing second. His breathing grew shallow and labored. This, he realized, was how it would end, left to perish on a desolate battlefield, forgotten. As oblivion crept in, Krax reflected on his homeworld, the honor he once cherished, and the warriors he had stood beside. They had all forsaken him. He closed his eyes, resigned to let the machines deliver the final blow. It would be a mercy compared to the deafening silence of his betrayal. Then, he heard voices, different this time. Not the chillingly detached tones of his kin, but something softer, more human. Krax blinked, struggling to maintain consciousness as the voices grew louder. His vision swam as he perceived them. A group of human soldiers moving swiftly through the debris, searching for survivors. Krax couldn't comprehend it. The humans weren't supposed to be here. The battle was lost. Everyone else had retreated. He tried to speak, but only a rasping sound escaped his lips. One of the humans noticed him, her eyes widening in surprise. She gestured to the others, and soon they were surrounding him, examining his injuries. They spoke rapidly, but Krax could barely decipher their words. He expected them to leave him, just as everyone else had. He was an alien, an outsider, and surely expendable to humans. Yet, as the minutes ticked by, they did not depart. They remained. The leader of the group, a human male with a prominent scar across his cheek, knelt beside Krax. "We're going to get you out of here," he stated, his voice calm yet resolute. Krax blinked in disbelief. These humans were choosing to save him, defying orders, risking their lives for an alien soldier who wasn't even of their own kind. He couldn't grasp it. Why would they do this? Why help him when even his own people had abandoned him? As the humans gently lifted him onto a makeshift stretcher, Krax's mind raced. In his world, strength was the ultimate virtue. But here, with these humans, he witnessed something entirely different. They were not the strongest species in the Alliance, nor the swiftest or most technologically advanced. But they possessed something else. Something Krax had never truly understood until this moment. Compassion, loyalty, a profound willingness to stand by their allies, even when it was inconvenient, even when it was perilous. Krax, the warrior who had always prided himself on his might, now found himself dependent on that very quality he had once dismissed. He didn't know if he would survive, but for the first time in his existence, he felt something other than duty and the call to battle. He felt hope. Krax lay in the makeshift shelter, surrounded by the humans who had rescued him. His wounds were severe, but their medic worked diligently, tending to him with unwavering focus, despite the unfamiliarity of his physiology. Krax remained silent, observing them with weary eyes. His species did not value weakness. Relying on others, especially humans, felt like an affront to everything he had been taught. His body was healing, but it was the discomfort of his wounded pride that stung more profoundly. He had been indoctrinated to believe strength was paramount, and here he was, broken, helpless, dependent on those who should have left him to perish. The human medic applied a peculiar gel to his injuries, the pain subsiding slightly. "You'll be fine," she assured him, her tone light yet reassuring. Her words held little weight for Krax. What did these humans want from him? Surely they hadn't acted out of pure altruism. He had witnessed enough warfare to know that no one offered aid without expecting something in return. He regarded the group with suspicion. The human commander, a grizzled man with a perpetually stern expression, commanded undeniable respect, and his loyalty to his team was evident. The others looked to him for guidance, and though his directives were blunt, they lacked any trace of cruelty. He had permitted the medic to treat Krax, despite the inherent risks. Krax couldn't fathom it. His own commanders would never squander resources on a soldier deemed no longer useful. Why were these humans so different? The jovial one, Krax didn't know his name, was conversing, injecting humor into the situation. His jests, though initially incomprehensible to Krax, seemed to uplift the spirits of the group. The others chuckled, even as they prepared for the next phase of their mission. It was a curious sight. Soldiers so at ease in the face of immense danger. Krax's people were stoic, perpetually prepared for combat, and any display of vulnerability was met with disdain. Yet these humans seemed to thrive on camaraderie, on shared moments of laughter, even when death loomed. It unsettled Krax. He shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond to their casual friendliness. When the medic inquired about his well-being, her concern seemed genuine, but Krax couldn't help but question its sincerity. "Why did you save me?" he asked, his voice rough. His species did not pose such questions openly, but the words escaped him before he could stop them. The commander, who had been cleaning a weapon nearby, glanced up. "You were alive," he stated matter-of-factly. "That's reason enough." It was as if saving someone, even an alien, was simply their standard practice. Krax stared at him, unable to reconcile this logic. Being alive was the sole justification needed. His own people had seen him alive and still left him to die. "I'm not one of you," Krax mumbled, his mind struggling to process the human's reasoning. The commander shrugged, as if the fact held no significance. "Doesn't mean we leave you behind." That was the difference, Krax realized. His people had always prioritized outcomes, victory at any cost, discarding the weak without a second thought. Humans, conversely, appeared to value life itself. It wasn't about utility for them. It was about something deeper, something Krax couldn't yet articulate, but it was undeniably present, a palpable force binding them together in a way his own species could not replicate. Over the ensuing days, as Krax's body gradually mended, he observed them more closely. They operated as a unit, but it wasn't merely efficiency that held them together. It was something more. The medic shared her rations with Krax, even though sustenance was scarce. She checked on him frequently, inquiring about his condition, and adjusting her care based on his responses. She displayed no hesitation in treating him, despite his alien physiology, which baffled Krax. The humorous soldier continued to crack jokes, not merely to alleviate the tension, but to include Krax in their banter. "Hey, you ever laughed before?" he inquired, grinning as he presented Krax with a makeshift meal. Krax regarded the human, uncertain how to respond. In his culture, humor was rare, a sign of weakness. But here, amidst the conflict, it seemed to imbue the humans with strength. They weren't afraid to express emotion, to be vulnerable, even as they faced imminent peril. Krax had always been taught to suppress such inclinations, to focus solely on the mission. Yet, here he was, partaking in their food, listening to their jesting, and finding a peculiar sense of ease in their presence. As the days progressed, Krax's suspicion began to dissipate, replaced by a growing admiration for these humans. They didn't require him to be strong, to prove his worth. They saw value in him simply because he was alive. It was a concept so foreign to Krax that it unsettled him, yet it also stirred something within him, something he had long buried beneath the weight of his training. He began to converse more, posing questions about their world and their customs. The humans were more than willing to share, recounting tales of their homeworlds, of their families, of simpler times. Krax listened, absorbing their words, their uninhibited openness. It stood in stark contrast to the rigid structure of his own people, where conversations were purely functional and personal matters were kept strictly private. Late at night, as the stars glittered above the war-torn landscape, Krax found himself contemplating his own kind. Would they have engaged in laughter, shared jokes, and recounted stories in such a manner? No. They would have deemed it a waste of time, a frivolous pursuit. They would have perceived it as weakness. But Krax was beginning to understand that it wasn't weakness at all. It was strength, the kind that arose from unity, not just in battle, but in life itself. One evening, as Krax sat alone, observing the humans prepare for their next endeavor, the commander approached him. "You're healing fast," he noted, glancing at Krax's wounds, which were mending with remarkable speed. Krax nodded. His body was resilient, but his thoughts were elsewhere. "Your people," he began, carefully choosing his words. "They don't abandon the weak." The commander tilted his head, studying Krax intently. "No, we don't," he replied. "We fight for each other." Krax remained silent for a moment, processing the stark contrast. His own kind had left him to die, yet these humans had risked everything to save him, even when it defied all logic. It wasn't merely about survival for them. It was about something more, something Krax was only beginning to comprehend. And for the first time in his life, Krax began to question whether strength was truly what he had always believed it to be. Barely had the humans established their makeshift encampment when the alarms blared. A new threat loomed on the horizon, a sudden enemy assault, completely unanticipated. The machines, their cold and calculating adversaries, had somehow pinpointed their location. It was only a matter of time before they swarmed the area, and the human squad possessed limited options. Krax felt the tension escalate. His body still ached from the injuries he was recovering from, but he was acutely aware of the gravity of the situation. The humans swiftly organized their movements, efficient and decisive. The commander issued orders, and the soldiers responded without hesitation, checking their weaponry and preparing for what would undoubtedly be a grueling engagement. Yet a sense of calm permeated their urgency, a quiet determination that enveloped the group. They had faced impossible odds before and emerged victorious. For Krax, however, the situation was far more complex. His gaze swept across the horizon, his heart pounding with unease. He was a warrior, but following his abandonment by his own kin and his near-death ordeal, something within him had shifted. Doubts had taken root. What if he was no longer strong enough? What if he failed them just as he had failed in that previous battle? His body might heal, but his spirit felt fractured. He was aware of the humans glancing at him. They didn't question his loyalty directly, but he could sense their unspoken need for reassurance. They had saved him, placed their trust in him, and now, facing this new danger, they expected him to fight alongside them. His instincts urged him forward, to fight as he always had, but his mind was clouded with uncertainty. The commander approached him, his gaze intense but not unkind. "We're up against it," he stated, his voice steady. "This is a long shot, but we need your help. No one knows these enemies like you do." Krax hesitated, his throat tightening. "I don't know if I can." His voice trailed off. It wasn't the physical pain that held him back, but the crushing weight of his failures, the betrayal by his own kind that had made him question everything. The commander studied him for a moment before speaking. "Look, I won't pretend this is easy," he said, "but we don't abandon our own. And that includes you. Now you're part of this squad. We've seen what you're capable of. You don't have to be perfect. Just fight with us." Krax glanced around at the others, the medic, the witty soldier, even the younger recruits. Each of them was preparing to face the enemy, fully aware of the risks. They had saved him without hesitation, treating him as one of their own, despite being from entirely different species. They weren't asking him to fight for their survival. They were asking him to fight with them. Something within him stirred, a faint but growing resolve. These humans didn't perceive him as broken. They didn't view him as expendable. To them, he wasn't a liability. He was part of the team. And for the first time in a long while, Krax felt the faint pulse of his warrior spirit reawakening. "I'll fight," Krax declared, his voice firmer than he expected. "I'm with you." The commander nodded, a brief flicker of approval crossing his face. "Good. We've got one shot at this." The mission was desperate, a plan to sabotage the advancing enemy forces before they could overrun the area. It was perilous, but it was their only chance for survival. The squad moved with haste, navigating the war-torn terrain with Krax at their side. His intimate knowledge of the machines proved invaluable, guiding them through hazardous sectors and identifying critical vulnerabilities in the enemy's defenses. Despite his initial apprehension, Krax seamlessly re-entered his old combat patterns, his tactical mind fully engaged as he coordinated with the humans. The enemy presence was far greater than anticipated. Drones patrolled the skies, scanning the landscape for any movement, while heavily armed ground units patrolled the perimeter. The resilience of the humans was on full display as they pressed onward, undeterred by the overwhelming odds. Even when outnumbered, they never faltered. Their tenacity was unlike anything Krax had ever witnessed. They moved with purpose, and a ferocity in their determination that transcended mere survival. As they reached the heart of the enemy stronghold, the plan rapidly unraveled. A patrol detected them, and alarms blared throughout the complex. Chaos erupted as the machines converged. The squad fought back fiercely, holding their ground, but it was evident they were at a disadvantage. The machines, relentless and unfeeling, surged forward in waves, severing their escape routes. Krax's mind raced. They were trapped. His instinct was to retreat, to regroup, but the humans did not falter. They fought with every ounce of their strength, refusing to abandon the mission, refusing to abandon each other. In the heat of the battle, Krax saw the commander pinned down by enemy fire, his squad barely maintaining their position. The medic had been hit, yet she continued to tend to the others, despite her own injuries. The witty soldier was wounded as well, but he kept firing, interjecting jokes between gritted teeth, as if defying the very peril that surrounded them. Krax's hesitation vanished. These humans had risked everything to save him. They had fought beside him without question, without reservation, and now, facing almost certain demise, they continued to fight, not out of obligation, but because they refused to give up on one another. Something clicked within Krax. His warrior instincts surged, more potent than ever before, not out of duty to his people, not for honor or glory, but for these humans who had shown him a loyalty he had never known. His injuries no longer mattered. His doubts were cast aside. Krax roared, charging into the fray, his alien strength, though battered, still formidable. He tore through the enemy ranks, utilizing every aspect of his combat training to carve a path for the squad. The humans fought alongside him, their movements synchronized, their trust in each other palpable. In that moment, Krax was no longer fighting for himself. He was fighting for them. As the tide of battle began to turn, Krax found himself at the forefront, leading the charge. The enemy forces started to falter under the combined might of the humans and Krax's newfound resolve. Together, they sabotaged critical systems within the base, crippling the machine's offensive capabilities. The mission, against all odds, was a success. When the dust settled and the surviving squad regrouped, Crax stood among them, no longer an outsider. He had proven himself, not just as a warrior, but as an integral part of their team. For the first time, he understood what it meant to fight for something beyond mere duty, for the bonds of loyalty and friendship. As the humans clapped him on the back, their faces etched with exhaustion but alight with smiles, Crax felt a profound sense of belonging. His strength had returned, but it was a different kind of strength now, one rooted not in the fear of failure, but in the unwavering trust of those who stood beside him. The battle was over, the base lay in ruins, and the machines were crippled, for now. Crax stood amidst the human soldiers, his body weary but his spirit resolute. The mission had been a triumph, though it had come at a cost. Several soldiers lay still, fallen in the final surge. The humans moved with a somber silence, their expressions hardened by grief. But there was a quiet dignity in the way they gathered their fallen comrades. Crax watched as they prepared a small ceremony, a simple yet powerful tribute to the companions they had lost. Each human stepped forward, offering words of remembrance or placing a personal memento beside the bodies. The commander stood silently, his expression unreadable, but his posture conveyed the immense weight of every life lost. The medic, her face pale from her own injuries, still managed to place a hand on a fallen soldier, whispering words Crax couldn't discern. This was new to Crax. His species did not mourn their dead. The deceased were simply gone, forgotten once their usefulness had ended. But these humans, these peculiar, resilient beings, honored their fallen as if each life held significance beyond its immediate role in war. It stirred something deep within Crax, something he couldn't fully define. This act, this ritual of remembrance, was a display of strength he had never comprehended. Crax stood apart, feeling like an intruder upon something sacred, yet he couldn't tear his gaze away from the scene. These humans had shown him more honor in a few days than his own people had in his entire life. His own kind had abandoned him, viewing him as nothing more than a broken tool. But here, among these soldiers, life held meaning beyond mere survival. As the ceremony concluded, Crax found himself walking toward the commander, who stood at the edge of the camp, gazing into the distance. Crax hesitated, unsure of what to say, uncertain if he possessed the right to speak at all. But something within him had shifted, and he knew he couldn't let this moment pass unspoken. "They were brave," Crax stated, his voice low but firm. "You're soldiers." The commander nodded, his gaze remaining fixed on the horizon. "They were," he confirmed. "They always are." Crax shifted, feeling the weight of his own words before continuing. "My people," he began. "We don't do this. We don't honor the fallen. They are forgotten, discarded, just as I was." The commander turned to him, his eyes sharp but not unkind. "And yet, you fought beside us." Crax paused, searching for the right words. "I've spent my life believing that strength was everything, that weakness was worthless. But I was wrong." He looked at the humans around him, those still standing despite everything they had endured. "You are stronger than any of us," he continued, "not because of your weapons or your numbers, but because of this. Because you don't abandon each other, because you care." The commander studied him for a moment as if weighing Crax's words. "Caring makes us vulnerable," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "But it's what keeps us human." Crax nodded slowly, understanding for the first time what that truly meant. His people had cast him aside when he no longer served their purpose. But these humans had seen him as something more than just a soldier. They had seen him as part of their team, part of something greater than the war itself. And in that realization, Crax had found a strength he hadn't known he possessed. The squad was preparing to depart, their mission accomplished. Crax could see the subtle exhaustion in their movements, the quiet grief still lingering in their eyes. Yet they pressed onward, resilient and unbroken. They were survivors, but more than that, they were bound by something far deeper than duty. Crax felt a pull, a tug at something deep within him. He had a choice to make. He could return to his people, to a world where he would forever be perceived as a failure, or he could remain with the humans, with those who had shown him the value of loyalty and compassion. It was a choice he had never anticipated, but now it seemed remarkably clear. As the humans packed their gear, Krax approached the commander again. "I want to stay," he stated, his voice steady. "I want to fight with you. Not because I owe you, but because I believe in what you're fighting for. I believe in you." The commander looked at him, his expression unreadable at first. Then, after a long pause, he nodded. "Then you're one of us." Those words struck Krax harder than any battle ever had. He was one of them. For the first time in his life, he wasn't fighting alone. He wasn't abandoned. He had found something worth fighting for, something beyond his own survival. He had found a family. As they prepared to leave the battlefield behind, Krax looked out into the vastness of space. He felt different now, as though a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The galaxy was still at war, but for the first time, Krax felt a sense of hope. He had witnessed the worst of his own kind, the cruelty and coldness that stem from prioritizing strength above all else. But he had also seen the best of humanity, their compassion, their loyalty, their unbreakable spirit. In that moment, Krax knew that humanity's greatest strength lay not in their weaponry or their numbers, but in their hearts. They fought not just for themselves, but for each other. And now, Krax was one of them. He had been abandoned by his people, but he had been saved by the humans. As they marched forward into the unknown, Krax felt a quiet sense of redemption. He had found his place, not through strength, but through loyalty. He had found his honor, not through battle, but through the bonds he had forged. And he knew without a shadow of a doubt that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with these humans at his side. Because now, they were his people too.